and we would do whatever we could to help.
In 1974, Nee begins running guns to the IRA.
Every year, they'd start coming with what we call shopping lists, and the shopping lists became larger.
Bulger offers to help. He and Nee begin raising money for guns from an unlikely source: Boston's drug dealers.
We took money off drug dealers locally. We had very little respect for most of them. It's what we call a soft shake. You know, it's either help us or be our enemy. The choice is yours.
But the IRA's demands keep growing.
The shopping list grew, our commitment grew, and then they came with the big shopping list.
In 1984, the IRA asks for one of the biggest shipments yet.
We got 60,000 rounds of ammo, rifles, shotguns, pistols.
Drug money buys the guns, and drug dealers supply a vessel, the Valhalla. The Valhalla sets sail in September 1984. The plan is to unload its deadly cargo onto an Irish ship and then return to Boston. But things go wrong when Irish police bust the shipment.
The operation to unload the massive arsenal started around dawn. Late this afternoon, the weapons and packing cases were loaded onto army lorries.
The Valhalla makes it back to Boston and straight into the hands of U.S. Customs.
In the United States, customs officers have seized an American trawler, the Valhalla, on suspicion of gun running for the IRA.
Customs agents seize the boat and take the crew into custody, including John McIntyre, a marijuana smuggler. McIntyre is questioned, then released. Bulger suspects McIntyre is cooperating with the authorities.
We heard that one of the two people that were on that boat were cooperating with law enforcement. Jim decided that it was possibly McIntyre. So we devised a plan to have him come in and find out exactly if it was him that was cooperating.
Weeks lures McIntyre to this South Boston house, then owned by a Bulger associate, with a party invitation. It's a trap. Under Bulger's relentless interrogation, McIntyre reveals that he's told the cops about the Valhalla. As Bulger's partners Steve Fleming and Kevin Weeks look on, Bulger discovers more. The terrified seaman reveals key details of Boston's drug trade. When Whitey Bulger's heard enough, he makes a fateful decision.
Jim Bulger decided that he couldn't trust McIntyre, so we killed him. And he decided to shoot him, so he shot him in the head. You know, he was still alive, then he shot him about 4 or 5 more times in the face and killed him. Afterwards, basically, we just took him and we dug a hole and buried the body, cleaned up, and went home.
Fleming yanks the teeth to hide McIntyre's identity.
In those days, they didn't have the DNA evidence. So one of the techniques for identifying bodies was dental records, and that's why the teeth were pulled.
This is not the only person who falls victim to Bulger. Bulger is on a murderous rampage. By 1986, U.S. Customs ties some of the Valhalla's guns to the man who bought them, Pat Nee. Nee gets 4 years in jail. He says nothing about Whitey Bulger's involvement. But dramatic events in Boston's North End district signal a change in Bulger's fortunes. In 1986, the FBI finally busts the leadership of the Boston Mafia. Local chief Jerry Angiulo is jailed for a staggering 45 years on assorted charges of racketeering. A year later, his consigliere Larry Zanino gets 30 years for similar crimes. Bulger's informant status is suddenly under threat. John Connolly, his handler, tries everything he can to link Bulger's name to the bust. he poses with the handcuffed Angiulo. And one day, Boston FBI Deputy Chief Robert Fitzpatrick discovers something more.
One agent came in and told me that John Connolly was stealing his information. Connolly must have thought, well, geez, their information's better than his, so I'll just borrow it, if you will, and I'll use it.
Connolly is stealing reports from other informants and passing them off as coming from Bulger. Fitzpatrick calls FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C.
I had said, look, Bulger and Flemmy, you can't use them as informants because you're then in bed with who's ordering the killings, the violence, the extortions, the kidnappings, and you're part and parcel of that. And that was a simple argument I thought I was making, but it fell on deaf ears.
Connolly and his supervisor John Morris have woven such a dense web of deceit around Bulger that no one at FBI headquarters believes Fitzpatrick's allegations.
I'm going against the grain. I'm being told by people at headquarters that perhaps I'm pushing this thing a little too much, and maybe I should back off. All of a sudden, things are changing, and I don't feel the support that I originally had.
Fitzpatrick is stonewalled. He quits the FBI in 1986. Meanwhile, Whitey Bulger becomes more involved in Boston's drug trade. Valhalla crewman John McIntyre had experience as a marijuana smuggler. Under Bulger's interrogation, McIntyre yielded names and contacts, helping Bulger extend his reach. Street corner deals attract a new kind of criminal to Southie, much to the disgust of old-school gangsters like Pat Nee.
Lowlifes. A lot of them were users. All of a sudden, they're making a ton of money. And when they got arrested, all of a sudden, they want forgiveness. And I'm sorry, who can I put in jail instead of me?
Bulger has made a crucial mistake. The drug trade leaves him vulnerable to dealers who turn squealers. It also makes him a target for a second federal agency, the DEA. If the DEA can link Bulger to drugs, his informant status may not protect him. In the early 1990s, after 15 years of murder and extortion under FBI protection, the tide is finally about to turn against James Whitey Bulger. In 1990, Boston's Irish gang boss James Whitey Bulger is starting to feel the pinch. For years, he has secretly been protected from the law, courtesy of 2 FBI agents. But now the DEA is beginning to close in. Drug enforcement agents find a South Boston street dealer with a story to tell. He's lost over $100,000 in a coke buy gone wrong, and it leaves him unable to pay Whitey Bulger. Fearing for his life, the dealer begins to talk. In August 1990, the DEA busts over 50 Bulger associates. In an instant, Whitey's drug ring is smashed, but Bulger remains free. FBI maneuvering keeps Bulger out of the DEA's case. Agent John Connolly continues to argue that Bulger is a valuable source on the mafia, but the pretext is wearing thin.
As you look over all those reports, they provided a lot of gossip about the mafia, but it was mainly stuff like, so-and-so's going to this wedding, or, Joey's brother opened a restaurant on Hanover Street.
Since the mid-'80s, the FBI has scored a string of major Boston mafia busts, all without significant information from Bulger.
I think the record would suggest that James Whitey Bulger did not give significant value to help dismantle the organized crime in Massachusetts. He gave some information that he thought would potentially be helpful to him, more helpful to him than helpful to law enforcement.
With Connolly's help, Bulger has successfully fooled the FBI into protecting him for over 15 years. But in December 1990, John Connolly reaches retirement age. With Connolly's departure, Bulger's informant status is terminated, just as the law is closing in. Federal prosecutors and the Massachusetts State Police build a case that links Bulger and Flemmi to extortion and money laundering. In January 1995, the cops pounce. Flemmi is arrested. A colleague of Connolly mentions plans for the bust to the former agent. Connolly wastes no time in tipping Bulger off. As Flemmi goes to jail, James Whitey Bulger goes on the run. During Flemmi's trial in 1997, the news breaks that Bulger and Flemmi are both FBI informants. The reports shake Kevin Weeks to the core.
In the last 20, 25 years of my life has been a lie. And the person that I trusted the most and I respected the most is doing everything that he preached against.
Kevin Weeks is finally arrested in 1999. It takes him 2 weeks before he gives information on Whitey Bulger. Weeks is breaking his own gang ethics, but he feels justified.
It was a painful decision in the sense that I was still loyal, but then I started getting mad because, you know, we killed people for being informants.
Weeks' testimony reveals the full brutal extent of Bulger's crimes. As the remains of Bulger's victims are recovered, investigators like Robert Fitzpatrick and Tom Foley are finally vindicated.
It wasn't until we started pulling the bones out of the ground and showing the bodies of their victims did some people take a step back and all of a sudden at that point say, okay. It finally started registering with people what we were dealing with.
John Morris is now a federal witness. In return for immunity, he rats on John Connolly, his co-conspirator.
I am innocent of the malicious charges that have been leveled against me in this case.
Connolly's tip-offs link him to at least 3 murders, including that of informant Brian Halloran. But in the end, Connolly is jailed for 10 years for racketeering, obstruction of justice, and lying to an FBI agent. True to his Southie roots, Connolly has stuck by his friend Bulger.
His relationship with Whitey grew over the years until he became a member of the gang. I mean, he had no scruples about telling Whitey anything. He couldn't draw a distinction between his role as an FBI agent, a law enforcement officer, and his role as a friend of the Bulger family.
In 2003, Whitey's brother, Billy Bulger, appears before the House Committee on Government Reform, a congressional watchdog that investigates federal wrongdoing. Before the panel, Billy falters.
Mr. Bulger, what is it that you thought your brother did for a living?
For the most part, I had the feeling that he was in the business of gaming and whatever. It was vague to me, but I didn't think of it for a long while.
Unable to explain how much he did or did not know of his brother's activities, he retires from public life. Today, Boston is counting the cost of the Bulger years. The Irish-American community terrorized. A city's faith in its public servants compromised. The reputation of America's premier law agency tarnished. After serving various terms in jail, Pat Nee has few regrets for his life of crime.
I love being a criminal, and I do miss it. My regrets are few. I regret not killing Whitey when I had the chance. And of course I regret getting caught for anything. Other than that, I just wish I had made more money and stashed it, but I didn't.
Kevin Weeks admitted participation in 5 murders, but served a reduced sentence in return for his cooperation.
If I saw Jim Bulger today walking down the street, I'd keep on walking. I mean, as far as I look at it, it's the FBI's problem. They created him. They allowed him to do what he was doing.